Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Cranston Mayor Allan Fung, who's here to talk to me about the city's budget. Mayor, you've proposed a roughly $303 million budget for the upcoming fiscal year beginning July 1st. That's about 1.5% more than the current fiscal budget, which is about $298 million.
Right.
What are some key highlights from your proposed budget this year that people should know about?
Well, the most important thing is we're not raising your taxes. Whether it's your property tax, whether it's your sewer tax, or, and there is a very difficult time, as we certainly understand. While the budget numbers increased, the budget number increased because, we're hoping to fund those, have the state fund a lot of the additional school aid that is projected to come down. So we didn't raise taxes because that was some the things that we heard and understand what our residents are going through. Businesses are struggling right now in Cranston. There's high unemployment. We saw the number of unemployment claims that many of our residents had to file. Many of the businesses that are still struggling, many of the restaurants that are, just keeping their doors open. So this budget, weighed heavily on them. We did the best that we can to make significant cuts, to maintain a no tax increase budget, but still maintaining a lot of our vital services. But it wasn't easy. Out of the 12 budgets that I've gone through right now, this was probably the most difficult for me to project and estimate, from revenues coming down from the state, education aid that's going to come down from the state, anything that we might receive on the federal end. So we did the best we could, but most importantly, to safeguard a lot of the vital services we provide and protect our taxpayers in these difficult times.
I want to get into the state aid and congressional aid in a minute, but one thing I did see is that part of balancing this upcoming year's budget, you've proposed to not fund 15 positions. Are those existing positions that currently are not filled, or are you talking about layoffs and furloughs?
No, those are 15 positions that are not filled right now, whether through retirements, normal attrition, but those are positions that are key positions in various departments, from police, fire, in City Hall, even our city treasurer's position that we did not fill. We're going to have other individuals doing those responsibilities just to save on those costs, because those 15 positions saved the city over $1 million alone. You talked about furloughs or even layoffs, depending on what might happen with state aid, because we're all waiting, not just Cranston, but every municipality across the state is waiting to see what the state does with their state budget. We're waiting on potentially what happens with the feds, because we might have to go further with those furloughs or even drastic layoffs if it comes. It's not something we as municipal leaders want to do, but it's certainly tools in our toolbox if it becomes unmanageable because the dollars aren't there and it all starts coming crashing down on us.
Remind me, Mayor, are there currently any layoffs or furloughs in Cranston?
No layoffs or furloughs right now. There are some part-time positions that we haven't been filling, requiring their services during this pandemic. A lot of the full-time employees are doing cross-function positions. So like right now we're in the midst of the presidential preference primary, where it's a heavily mail ballot election with some people still coming in for emergency ballots. So we've reassigned 4 workers from different departments to staff those. So people are doing different job functions because of this pandemic. We've had to change how we do business. City Hall really is kind of somewhat close to the public. Right now, people can still come in to drop off tax payments, do some limited services like filing for items in the clerk's office, but we're not necessarily open to the public right now.
So talking about state aid, I noticed in the budget that the city is assuming that it's going to receive the same amount of state aid that it received last year. Obviously, the General Assembly and the governor are kind of I don't know how you describe it, in a standstill at the moment, trying to look to the feds as to whether or not there'll be more money coming. What's the feeling from cities and towns right now in terms of how much the state and the federal government are going to be there for you in a finance
right? And we budgeted because they are in a standstill based on state law, existing state law, which allows us to rely upon the prior year's municipal revenues and aid that comes to us when you have a pandemic type emergency like this and they are at a standstill. So, even then we made reasonable assumptions to the best we can based upon this COVID crisis. For instance, even though the state was projecting us to get like $2.2 million in the meals, that extra 1% in meals tax that normally comes to Cranston, we cut that by 20% because we know it's not going to hit that projection because you got a lot of restaurants that are closed, not even doing takeout. So we try to do the best we can. We've been advocating as mayors, myself, other municipal CEOs all across Rhode Island for a continuation of the aid. Basically a do no harm, because we are the frontline individuals that see what is going on in our backyards with our residents and businesses. We're asking the state leaders, we've sent a letter to the governor, we've copied the speaker as well as the Senate president. We've actually, are doing a second follow-up to all those individuals to say, look, protect us. We're not asking for any increases, but protect us because we've been hit hard. We see it locally, but most importantly, fund the kids, fund the students, fund that 10th year of the educational aid funding formula, because that's where the dollars need to go. And that's what is in my budget. The dollars that were projected to come down from the state, we left what was intact from the governor's budget for municipal aid, and that's what we're advocating for. But we're also asking for other tools too to help us get through this crisis. Municipal tools that we've been asking for from day one, but more especially important during a crisis like what we're seeing, an unprecedented pandemic.
What just to play devil's advocate here, what happens if Congress doesn't pass any type of stimulus package that provides money for state and local aid, and suddenly, as you've seen, obviously the state is facing, I think, $800 million deficit in both this current fiscal year, the next fiscal year. Say they decide to take a haircut in their aid to municipalities, where does that leave you in terms of balancing the budget if it goes that route?
It's not a situation that any municipal leader wants to be, but that's what people elected us or appointed us into these positions that we'll have to do. We will have to make further drastic cuts, in terms of services, whether it's for our seniors, cutting vital education programs for our children in our schools. We talked about, possible more, furloughs or layoff days for a lot of our employees, reducing further our ability for our first responders to respond, even in these heightened times with the COVID calls that we get. It's not a pretty picture, but the bottom line is we have to do what we need to if those funds don't come down. And that's why part of our advocacy isn't just at the state level, urging, the governor and the General Assembly leaders to keep us, where we were from last year. We are advocating at the national level. We have been working with our federal delegation to say, look, we need your help. We need it more so now because of this unprecedented pandemic to fund us at the state and local level. We appreciate the dollars that came into the state from the CARES Act, but one of the problems with the CARES Act was it didn't allow, the local municipalities or even the state to replace revenue, because this is where we're really seeing it. We have been, incurring a lot of expenses. Cranston, at last count, had, close to $600,000 in expenses that we've incurred for this crisis so far, from whether it's first responder overtime, Chromebooks that we had to pick up for a lot of our students that didn't have that technology ability, to, other even buying plexiglass or other type of support to help for sanitation and protection of our employees when we open back up. Those are the hard costs that we see, but it's the revenues that really hit us hard at the local level and the state level. And that's why we are working with other mayors across the country, working with groups like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, to push the federal delegation and our president to make this a priority to fund us at the local level, or else we have to make these drastic cuts.
And just to be clear, those hard costs that you're referencing, those, of course, as you understand it, would be reimbursed by the money that you got through the CARES Act. Is that right?
And whether it's the CARES Act or even other potential funding sources
Okay.
like FEMA or CDBG, because there've been several buckets that have been designated for use by communities or the state. And for us, we're tallying all those costs and trying to figure out the best reimbursement that can come back to cities and towns, especially for those hard costs.
Besides the state aid, which of course is such an important source of revenue for cities and towns, where are you seeing the public health crisis hurt revenues the most in terms of municipal revenue?
For municipal revenue right now, we are very fortunate that we've turned things around in Cranston throughout the, decade plus I've been in office, helped our finances by building up a solid rainy day fund. Because of that, and so many people out of work and businesses that have had to be shuttered, we were able to withstand giving the taxpayers a break in their fourth quarter tax payments. We pushed the payments out to May 15th, just a couple days ago, to give them a little bit of breathing room. We're also going to be able to waive any interest owed to the end of the year in the fourth quarter. So we're doing whatever we can at the local level to give them breathing room, but it hurts because, if we weren't in that better financial position with the rainy day fund, we would not be able to absorb a lot of the costs that are coming through right now. And that's where, those decade plus of making sound financial decisions to get our books in order have really helped out the taxpayers. Because what we're going to be projecting going forward is, this still continuing maybe throughout the summer. Where the restaurants are going to need a little bit of time to pick back up to get to where they were before. But this is the time right now where we're going to be by their sides, the industry side. We're going to be there by those owner sides. We're going to be there for our resident sides to try to do the best we can to help them get through the crisis. But it's going to be a coordinated effort because we can only do so much at the local level. The CARES dollars came in through the state. Hopefully they can think more creatively to try to get those dollars into the small business owners' hands, get more PPE into their hands, because that's the struggle right now. They're not able to get a lot, for restaurant owners, the mask, the gloves, the sanitation supplies, because they've been closed and shuttered and they're trying to figure out where to turn. That's what we're hearing the most right now. As far as any type of relief going forward, taxpayers are, still standing strong. They've been, whether it's through unemployment or whether many of them are still working, they're still making their payments to the best extent that they can. And Cranston is doing their part. They're Cranston strong, and we're going to be there for them all throughout this crisis now and into the future.
Let's talk economy a little bit here. Like you mentioned, a lot of businesses are shut down right now, trying to figure out how they can reopen under the new restrictions of only being allowed to open with outdoor seating. That may change in the coming months, but currently a lot of people are staying closed because they don't have the capacity or the ability, or the dollars and cents don't make sense to do it. Retail also, of course, has been hit hard because they were forced to shutter for a couple months as well. In talking to your members of your business community, Cranston has a lot of great restaurants, retail spots. What are you hearing from them in terms of making it work?
It is difficult because, we had a thriving hub in Garden City and Chapel View where people were coming from not just, Cranston, but across the state and even from Connecticut and Massachusetts to shop and dine at, some of those great establishments that are there. Right now, a lot of the businesses are hurting. Even with the slow, opening, some of the retailers are still taking it cautiously, doing it more as curbside, but we're working with them, trying to see what else that they might need, flexibility from a regulatory standpoint from us locally. The restaurants, the expanded indoor dining, some of the restaurants are being cautious about the approach. Some don't want to incur those extra costs because they might not have the tables and chairs or even umbrellas or even invest in a tent, to do that service. Right now, with the expanded executive order that I issued along with in concert with the governors, we've had about 32 restaurants as of close a business yesterday that put in for that expanded outdoor dining. So it's encouraging because 32 out of, we probably have about close to 200 restaurants, of all different sizes that are in Cranston. But, 32 is a good number. And hopefully we see more. And as the in-person dining indoors is going to be coming, hopefully in the next phase, we'll see more restaurants start getting back on their feet, trying to, expand the capacity for those that are still currently open and just doing takeout or doing the limited expanded dining. We're going to be there and make it as simple as possible. And for the restaurant executive order, that's what I tried to do. Instead of having a process where we have to go out and check every 32 restaurants that applied, all we did was a simple, here's a one-page letter that you have to certify as the owner or, manager of that establishment. You understand the guidance that health department, the governor's executive order, my executive order says, you're practicing safety for the residents who, come to dine at your establishment. You have a little bit of signage and barrier from the parking lot to there. We made it as simple as possible. They certify to that. Here's your license for those businesses that are in good standing. And there you go, and off you're running. And we're going to try, as more is opening up, that's what we're going to continue to do to make it as simple as possible for them. And by the way, even for those restaurants, we waived any type of permit or license fee for them because we understand they're struggling. We're trying to be a partner to them.
Mayor, it's almost been 3 months since we saw the first case in Rhode Island. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. But I'm wondering, much of the response so far from the state has been coming from the governor's office, Governor Raimondo. I'm just curious, from your perspective, how's she doing?
Well, I can tell you, our community was one of the first ones hit too, because outside of Pawtucket that had the St. Ray's case, we had the Cranston West where we had to lock down 1,700 students, faculty, staff that were there. So it's been a long road, but through it all, we're working well with the state, the governor, trying to communicate as best as possible. There's been hiccups along the way. There are hiccups even now that we're all trying to work through because communication is critical, especially as, people really want to get back to whether it's some sense of normalcy, the ability to dine out, the ability to just, get their kids to maybe even some of the recreational facilities to, throw a baseball, throw a football around between father and son, or, mother and daughter throwing a softball around, or, any other activity that they can do jointly as a family. This is where, we're working steadily towards working with the governor's office, health department, DBR, trying to get everyone on the same page. But, I said, there are hiccups in the process because even with this opening, with the expanded dining with the restaurants, we caught a little curveball to our head, because the communication didn't flow, as steadily down to us for the implementation. But we worked through it. And that's what we do as leaders. We work through any of the issues that pop up. As soon as the governor and Department of Health are saying that it's safe, we're going to work our tail off at the local level to make sure business owners and residents can get the services that they deserve.
A lot of people are starting to express some frustration with the speed at which they're allowed to reopen or that they're allowed to get back out to some of these places. Have you been generally pleased with the timing of the shutdowns and now the schedule for reopening?
Everyone's frustrated, including myself as a local leader, because, we want to get back to normalcy, and it's going to take some time. And, I'm glad that there is a thoughtful process out there, the 4 phases that have been outlined, but we really have to get to it some more and start opening back up some of these businesses, or at least letting businesses know which timeline that they fall under. And that's where I think we're getting a lot of questions at the local level from our business owners, a lot of the residents, to figure out exactly when we can get back to some sense of normalcy. And we're doing our best to try to coordinate with the state. And we've been asking people to be patient, but it's tough because we are in, I think, what is this, like week 11 or 12 now. It's a lot to ask of people to stay home during this time. We understand that. We're asking for their patience, and we are at the local level, especially in Cranston, working to do the best we can based on the information that we're provided.
Just about out of time here, Mayor. Just want to give you an opportunity, as people are wondering how this will continue to shake out. Do you have any message to your residents or anyone else in the state that might be watching this interview?
Well, to everyone throughout the state, we're by your side. And to the Cranston residents and anyone that throughout the state that really has stepped up, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, because you've responded to not only my calls to help out like the food bank, help out the blood banks because of the shortages that are going on, helping out even our local news that have been struggling throughout this time, or our businesses. You are the heart and soul and lifeblood of our communities. You make up our backyard and let us know what you need, and we're there for you. But we also appreciate you stepping up, especially for our first responders. I've seen the best from from our community, especially from our students. Cranston East, Cranston West, not only current students, but alumni stepping up to donate to first responders, food, donate to people in our nursing homes, donate to the food banks. This is what makes me proud and why I love being mayor of this great city. So, to keep it up, I'm proud of all of you, and we can't thank you enough for all that you're doing.
Cranston Mayor Allan Fung, thank you so much for joining me for today. For much more on the city's budget and Cranston's response to the coronavirus, visit our website, wpri.com.